Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at PTB World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at what happened earlier today in an unfortunate and condemnable incident in the long march that has been carried out by the PTI chairman and the former Prime Minister, who was apparently targeted in an attempt apparently to assassinate him, which is what is being spread around in terms of the kind of incident that took place. Of course, this was being carried out by an individual that was later arrested by the police, and according to the statements given by him, he says that he has targeted the PTI chairman because of political reasons, in terms of his ideology, in terms of what he's talking about, and the way that he's bringing this particular narrative and forming that within the public domain as well. He also mentioned within his statements another reason for him to do so was the fact that there was music coming in from the rally at the time of prayers, which is why this was not something that could have been tolerated by him, and so he decided to carry out this particular attack. We're going to explore, of course, these reasons as well in further detail, but we want to also take a look at the larger ways in which this particular incident reflect the kind of tolerance that exists within the public domain and the kind of involvement that we have from religious elements in the political sphere as well. Unfortunately, a lot of this is also in contribution to the political leadership, who brings in such particular elements within their own narratives and the way that they also campaign their particular mandates. This, of course, is important in the discussion since this is where we perhaps will find a solution to such issues. However, when we take a look at what has happened today, of course, it is something that has been condemned by the political leadership, by the Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, who has, of course, said that he has condemned this in the strongest words, and that he's also directed the Interior Minister for an immediate report on the incident. He's praised for the recovery of PTI chairman and the injured people, and that violence has and should have no place in the country's politics. Similar sentiments have also been echoed by the Foreign Minister, the President, the Interior Minister, and the Information Minister. And of course, everybody is agreed on one thing, that this is something that needs to be investigated. Earlier, in a joint presser, the Interior Minister and the Information Minister also condemned this particular incident and then talked about how this is something that needs to be investigated, and that the Punjab Police as well as the administration should really take a look into this, and instead of speculations, or instead of outrightly blaming and politicizing this particular incident, what needs to be done is that a proper investigation needs to take place to find out what really has happened and who is responsible for this. So we're going to be, of course, taking a look at all of this in light of what has happened today and how it's going to impact the evolving situation and what really needs to be done moving forward. We're also going to be taking a look at what has, of course, happened in the aftermath of the very important visit by the Prime Minister to China, in which we understand a number of MOUs and agreements have been signed. There is, of course, a lot of bilateral engagement in terms of how Pakistan and China can further proceed towards more and deeper investment and trade relations. And this is important, especially in terms of the kind of economic situation that Pakistan is currently going through. We also know that a lot of the issues that have been discussed are with relation to CPEC and its related projects, particularly the Karachi Circular Railway project, which is expected to be expedited. And we also understand that there is a lot of support coming in from the Chinese leadership in terms of the flood-related activities as well, in which a further 500 million yuan have been promised by the Chinese government for help to flood-related activities. And moving forward, of course, how we're going to be seeing that evolve into different investment opportunities within Pakistan is going to be what we're going to be looking at in our second segment. And the third, another important relationship, of course, Pakistan and the US, which is extremely important in terms of where we stand, how we've partnered with the US in the past as well, and how we want to be able to see this particular relationship flourish in the coming days as well. We also know that in light of this, there has been a very important conference, a two-day conference that has been taking place in Washington, in which a number of such issues and this particular relationship was discussed. It's the Future of US-Pak Relation 2022, and this has been jointly organized by a number of entities, including the Center for Security, Strategy, Policy and Research in Lahore, the University of Lahore, Johns Hopkins University, Engro Corporation, and many others as well, who are part of this particular conference in terms of the kind of discussion that took place, and also the keynote speaker was the Pakistani ambassador to the United States, who talked about the different ways in which US-Pakistan can further cooperate and, of course, deepen ties, especially as a result of the growing startups in Pakistan and how that can also be taken into account. So at the end, that is what we're going to be looking at and discussing furthermore, what is going to be the future of US-Pak relations and how we would like them to flourish, and what sort of environment would there be in terms of this potential reaching its full height. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farokh Batafi and Raja Faisal. And for our later segments, especially the ones on the US and Pakistan relation, we're going to be joined later by Michael Kugelman. But for now, we're going to start off with what has happened in terms of course, the very condemnable and unfortunate incident that took place earlier today. Of course, there is a lot of condemnation that has been coming in, and we're all agreed on that page. But Faisal, when we take a look at, of course, the kind of political temperature and the kind of environment that has existed, this, of course, is something that is again being politicized, and there's been a lot of speculations being carried out by the PTI leadership. And it's unfortunate because, of course, the kind of statements coming in from the government, from the leadership, should be something which is encouraging, because we're obviously asking for an investigation into the incident. But we also need to understand how important it would be to not politicize or speculate at this point. But unfortunately, the way that we've seen the context flow, especially in terms of what has happened in the recent days and weeks by the PTI leadership, how do you see now, in the aftermath of this particular incident, things evolving in the political dynamic?
Sana, evolving things, obviously, in context of whatever has happened today. First of all, condemnation should be issued from our program as well. We condemn it, as the government has condemned it, and everyone in Pakistan is condemning it. Reason being, if we talk about Imran Khan, he's an opposition leader and a very important person in Pakistan right now, and he has a huge following. And of course, if something happens to him, it will create a chaos. And thankfully, today, obviously, there was an attack on him. He is injured, and our prayers are with him for quick recovery. But whoever did this, it must be probed. Right now, of course, I talked with one of my journalist colleague. Obviously, he works with one of the other media houses. He was there. He was almost around 10 feet away from Imran Khan, and he told me that there were fires, shots coming from 3 different locations. Okay. So to me, I think this whole episode needs a probe, a deep probe. Why I say this? Because he said that the other locations from where the guns which he was predicting, he said the AK-47s might have been used, and not from where that guy who got caught was there. He said that there were one other locations from where he could feel that fire was coming. The initial burst, which we heard in the video footages as well, I think it must be probed. It can be another conspiracy to disrupt the peace in Pakistan. And looking at the current situation, when there was sort of political chaos on the ground, someone might have wanted to gain out of it and to blame the government. And right now, of course, government has extended its condemnation, and government sitting in the federal city is probing it and is making sure that everything is offered to probe it. Because when we talk about Imran Khan, of course, Imran Khan is a very important person in Pakistan right now, and I think this is how the things should move on. The probe should be conducted, and the probe should be a deep probe. Plus, if we look at the the initial submission by the person who was caught red-handed, he obviously highlighted one of the aspect of it was that he had sort of reservations on this march because they were constantly playing songs, and he had that kind of concern. To me, I think at a larger level, there should be understanding that religion should never be used in politics, because when it gets used, of course, further problems are raised, and them problems, of course, lead to a chaos. Every political party should abstain from it.
Absolutely, and of course it's important to take a look at that particular dynamic as well. But before that, Farokh, I want to understand, of course, there is the aspect of investigation, and this is something that everybody is calling for and will be important in figuring out what really happened and what the facts are. Similar, of course, investigations are what are expected and what are the right way forward in terms of such incidents, especially also in Arshad Sharif's murder as well. But when we take a look at, of course, when we're going to be finding out what has happened or how the investigation is going to proceed, that's a long way forward. Right now, whatever the political temperature has been as part of the long march, of course, it has been really high, and people may have just come to their own conclusions based on whatever following they've had or whatever narrative they have believed in. And because of that, what can be done in the current situation to prevent any further politicization or any further deterioration of the way that the political situation has been evolving in the past, and in terms of how public reaction is going to be maintained, because this also perhaps seems to be an outcome of that.
Right, Sana, first of all, it is highly deplorable incident, and this is exactly what I did. I deplored and I condemned immediately. Then, of course, there is this issue of fog of crisis or fog of pandemonium. That bit which Faisal was referring to, the AK 47 being involved, or three guns or something like that. Anybody who was there, whenever there is pandemonium, usually people's minds exaggerate things also. So we don't know at this moment, and there should be an investigation. But before I actually come to the investigation part, and which is very important, I have questions of my own. Let me take you back to one night before Imran Khan Saab's start of a long march. If you remember, I was sitting here with you, and I was talking on air about one Twitter space that Imran Khan Saab was doing. And I pointed out that the kind of language, messianic language, was being used usually actually makes the leader, whosoever it is. I was comparing it with Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto Sahiba's incident, that at that time people were using similar kind of language. And what it does, it makes the leader care less about their own security, because the mission is more important, whatever the mission might be. And that's how Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, while she was repeatedly being told not to go to Liaquat Bagh, she went there and she got assassinated. Similarly, at this moment also, it was the concern. I have been flagging this for quite some time, especially a night before the long march were to start. Having said that, now let us come to today's sad incident, right? There are many things we still don't know. I have seen somewhere that it is a flesh wound, but still, when you look at the way the target took place, the way attack took place, we know that there was somebody who was trying to foil the attack as well. And in that moment, a stray bullet, was fired, and that actually ended up with Imran Khan Saab, or injured him. The question at this moment is also, what was the angle? We haven't seen the angle of the shot, because when I saw, the pistol was very high. Yeah. So how did it end up on the leg? Secondly, my question at this moment is, when we know Imran Khan is former Prime Minister, and there has been security lapses, and there have been concerns about security, why is it that such a person, high value target, was allowed to stand in open without any kind of bulletproof glass? Whosoever actually came up with the whole container needs to answer, why is it that the foil that was used to protect him was so thin that a bullet actually crossed it without even actually totally destroying it? This is a big question as well. And somebody needs to answer all these questions, because in Punjab it is PTI that is ruling. Then the kind of video, the confession you were talking about, the sad bit, the religious bit
Yes.
about that is that I've been actually for 10 years, 11 years repeatedly saying this, that whenever you actually use religious language, there is a boomerang effect. It comes back to you, right? Because you are then appealing to the baser instincts of the society. Why is it that Imran Khan Sahab's own supporters, people around him, have not told him to actually cut down on their religious appeals? Because then the other side also uses religion, and it becomes really sad. In that kind of state of affairs, when there's pandemonium and polarization in the society, high value target is a lame sitting duck on a box, a container box, and there they actually took shot. This perhaps was a lone wolf attack, but you never know. Whenever circumstances are this hot, the enemies of the country start working, because then they get a method to actually attacking and making two factions fight. So at this moment, this is also worrying. I had a couple of other issues as well. Role of media and Punjab police is astounding. When does it happen that confession actually immediately makes
Yes.
it to the screen? Then I don't know whosoever was recording that video perhaps had placed the camera on a typewriter, because it is like continuously swinging. I don't know what exactly was that about either. And then, I mean, usually whenever there's an attack, somebody dies or somebody is injured, you cordon off the place. Why is it that all the reporters were like, hanging with the container like monkeys and constantly reporting, and there was no cordon to be seen? All these issues are big questions, and astoundingly, we have responded to the situation with characteristic naivete that we have seen in the past as well.
Yes, Sana, I just
Absolute-
wanted to mention
yes.
one more thing. At the same time, Farooq has highlighted excellent point that police came up with that confessional statement so quickly, and it shouldn't have happened. At the same time,
Come up with as quickly as possible. Don't
Yeah.
release it to the media.
Exactly. And the second thing is, at the same time, I want to highlight another factor of PTI as a political party. Of course, we know that they held a presser as well. Two of their tier 1 leaders, they were sitting in it, and they took the names. Two of the names they took, obviously they are from the government, Interior Minister and Prime Minister. And the third name they took, obviously, he's one of the respected generals. To me, I think it was too early. They should have sort of, sat down, thought about it carefully, because at this moment they are not in a shape to, predict something so quickly. They need to understand that there could be a third force or fourth force, or whoever wants the peace of the country to be disrupted, that could be involved. So I think they need to come up with the names, but not as quickly as they
No,
have
hang
done.
on, and let me add to this as well, because there's a saying, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. On one side, you would refer to the federal government as a government of 24 kilometers, and then what you are doing is, it was happening in a city which is firmly inside Punjab province, where your party has government, where you could actually allocate as many security details as you wanted. You could have ensured the structural integrity of the body in which he is traveling, right? You could have convinced the man to actually wear some kind of protective gear as well, without actually showing it to the people, but you could have done it. Why is it? I understand when you are Faisal, you're concerned about the third name. But the question is, why should we actually name the first two either? Because you, according to your own point of view, they too, the Prime Minister and the Interior Minister, have no purview in Punjab. So who should be responsible for that? If anybody is going to resign, first of all, the person who should be resigning is the Interior Minister of Punjab, right? Or advisor, or whosoever it is. And then, of course, the responsibility goes to the Chief Minister. We have to be very clear about it. We are talking about post 18th Amendment governments, where all powers actually lie with the province. And this was a provincial city. It came under purview of the province. Why even actually go there? Because your rhetoric, whether you realize it or not, might actually make a political point. But compared it with Imran Khan Sahib himself, who said that I'm not going to be caddied, I will actually wave to the people and then go, so that there is no pandemonium. Your leader is doing that, and you are actually aiding, putting, throwing oil on the fire. Why so? These are the questions that one has to keep in mind. These leaders need to be told by their own leader. For heaven's sake, have mercy on this country.
Absolutely, and these are of course the questions that have also been asked by the Interior Minister and the Information Minister as well, and they must be answered. And of course the responsibility and accountability of the Punjab government is there, and they need to answer of course in terms of what happened and who of course is responsible. We're going to now quickly look at the Prime Minister's visit to China and what all has come out of it. Of course the main focus has been the revitalization of CPEC, but Farooq, of course when we take a look at the overall engagement between China and Pakistan, a lot in terms of CPEC has been important, and we've had a lot of discussions on what Pakistan needs to be doing about sustaining this particular development in the future, and especially with the second phase coming in, being able to work towards more progress with regards to these projects. But especially when we take a look at this particular visit and what all has been achieved in terms of the Prime Minister's engagements. Now in the aftermath of this visit, what do you see in the coming days and months in terms of CPEC related activities? There's one of course with regards to the Gawada International Airport that is going to be expedited, another one perhaps the Karachi Circular Railway project. But will we be able to see all of that happening considering what is going on at home?
Right, Sana, first of all, let me just correct the record. This visit was not merely to actually revitalize CPEC, it was to revitalize the bilateral relationship.
No, sure.
Which is very important. No, hang on. New Prime Minister, first visit to China. Old government in China, but new mandate. And after that, there's this meeting that is taking place. Both countries have a lot to actually focus on, and they had a lot of notes to compare. I think that was the first win which was there, because the Prime Minister went there and met with top leadership, the President and also the Prime Minister, right? Then, of course, there were interactions with businesses also. Now, there is something that is going on internationally regarding CPEC, which is very important to understand. Since CPEC was announced, enemies of CPEC have not taken rest. India's propaganda, they have actually started channels focusing on CPEC and attacking China and Pakistan both, because they are intolerant of either countries, right? Because of all that propaganda, all these issues, whatever is announced, immediately becomes a target. You were right about expediting, the Gawada airport, because that is very important. Without that, Gawada is not going to take off, right? Then the circular railway, how old is that project? And now finally it is going to get a new lease on life. The third one is ML1. And my understanding is that there was an agreement. Actually, the agreements in the past had taken place as well, but this time also, once again, there was principal agreement that it is going to be expedited. Then the interaction with the business community. Remember that the second phase of CPEC is not merely about infrastructure, it is about revitalizing Pakistan's export capacity. And this export capacity is going to be two-tiered, two-directional. One direction is exporting it to the world by Pakistan becoming a very important part of China's value chain. And the other one is Pakistan exporting to China itself, which is a booming market and opening up as well. So that was also in principle agreed upon. What you see at this moment is our media has, expectation that everything will have to be, announced with drums being beaten around it. Right? That doesn't happen because this is China's style. The moment they put it out there, immediately the enemies start working, and perhaps we are not actually that active in countering that. So at this moment, I think that this visit and its impact is going to actually keep reminding of the importance of it every month, every week, and every year.
Absolutely, and we really hope that is the case. Let us now move on our focus to Pakistan and US relations, and of course, the very important two-day conference that took place in Washington, in which the future of Pak-US relations were discussed and important aspects of it were highlighted. Let me welcome in the debate Michael Kugelman, right at Foreign Policy Weekly South Asia Brief. Thank you very much for joining us, Michael, and being a part of the debate once again. Of course, in terms of what the relationship dynamic has been, you're of course you've been writing about Pakistan and its, of course, dynamics with the US and other political matters as well, and you understand how this relationship has evolved. But in terms of what we see in the current scenario and what has been going on internationally as well, in terms of the kind of global crises that we've been seeing, especially with reference to what is going on in Afghanistan, there is, of course, the way that the importance or perhaps the shift in the dynamic between US-Pakistan has existed. And then, of course, on top of it, the kind of political controversy at home with regards to US involvement in the political dynamics of Pakistan have also impacted this relationship in the current times. But, of course, in terms of what we see in the future, there is a lot of potential in which Pakistan and the US can work together, and many of those areas have been highlighted in this particular conference. But how do you see, in terms of where we stand right now, in terms of what is going on globally, especially with regards to economic and food security issues, how do you see Pakistan and the US dynamic evolving when we take a look at especially trade and investment relationship, because that's, of course, another very important aspect for the country?
Yeah, so first, thanks, Sana, for bringing me back. Good to be back here. I'm cautiously optimistic right now about the future of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, more optimistic than I had been some months ago. And it's true that the U.S. departure from Afghanistan was a major geopolitical shift that provided an opportunity for U.S.-Pakistan relations. But I would argue that initially it was not necessarily seen as an opportunity by Washington, and more as really an excuse to simply let Pakistan go and not focus on the relationship with Pakistan anymore. But the good thing is that I think we've seen Washington change that position. I think now we're starting to see U.S. officials view the withdrawal from Afghanistan as an opportunity for the relationship with Pakistan, because it now means that the U.S. can finally pursue its relationship with Pakistan through the lens of Pakistan and not through the lens of Afghanistan. And the fact there's been so much discussions, so many high-level engagements between the two sides on a variety of non-Afghanistan and non-security issues in recent weeks is pretty significant. And you mentioned the two-day conference here in Washington. I think it's very important that the organizers wisely brought in Dilawar Syed as a keynote speaker. He, of course, is the top official at the State Department focused on investment issues. He does not have a Pakistan portfolio, though he is a Pakistani American. The fact that he came to speak at the conference some months after having been in Pakistan for almost a week to discuss trade and investment opportunities, that's very important. And I think it shows that on very high levels, there is receptivity within the U.S. government for broadening the relationship with Pakistan. But you know what? The question is if this current momentum can be sustained, because bandwidth in Washington is very precious, right? And you never know what else could come up and that could divert the U.S. from this newfound focus on Pakistan.
Yeah, Michael, it's so good to have you today once more. If we talk about bilateral relations between Pakistan and U.S., I think U.S. has the understanding that Pakistan has is full of ample opportunities when it comes to artificial intelligence, emerging technologies, mainly the IT sector, because our workforce in the IT sector, they are already working in the Middle Eastern countries, Canada, America, and Britain, and the European countries as well. Just wanted to know, obviously it is always highlighted that the Indian IT experts, they are with a very good lobbying, working in one of the best IT hubs of America. When we will be seeing in coming future that the Pakistanis start doing that kind of thing, and of course when it comes to the mightiest IT hubs working in them, it can never be possible with the help of strengthening the bilateral relations. So would we be given that kind of chance in coming future?
Well, it will be a challenge because you mentioned India, and there's certainly a comfort level between Washington and New Delhi when it comes to cooperating on tech issues, just because there's been that cooperation for quite some time. And of course, there's a very large Indian American diaspora here, which has strong representation in the U.S. tech sector. So that's it's going to be tough to get around that. But indeed, I think that Americans are increasingly aware of the opportunities offered by the Pakistani tech sector, and there are quite a few Pakistani Americans that are in Silicon Valley. I should say that, and they've been some of them have been very vocal about their desire to strengthen the relationship with Pakistan through tech issues. But I think that the question is, and really this puts the ball in Pakistan's court, how does Pakistan make that pitch to the United States that the Pakistani tech industry is one to take a closer look at when the U.S. has been able to already avail itself of so many opportunities with the Indian tech sector? What sets Pakistan's tech sector apart? What fresh new opportunities are there for the U.S. and for U.S. investors that would maybe not be there and would not be duplicative of what India's has to offer? I'm not trying to hyphenate the relationships with India and Pakistan, but I think it is important for Pakistan to make that case that its own tech sector has some
Right.
unique advantages that others may not have.
Yeah.
Right. And Michael, welcome back on the program. If I had my way, you would be a permanent fixture in this program. But regarding what you were saying earlier, I'm glad that we are talking about technology. Look, any Pakistani being elevated in Silicon Valley is a secondary concern for Pakistani market. The primary concern is in getting American investment in Pakistan. And I understand that most of Pakistan's woes are because of its economic condition. What can Pakistan do to actually attract American investment? Because every time there is an investment, usually it is thought or it was claimed that two countries that have McDonald's don't go to war with each other. And similarly, the biggest thing is if there is an investment in Pakistan, then there is more avenue for Pakistan, US relations, people to people, and business to business to grow. What are the things that you think can actually help in attracting that kind of investment?
Well, I mean, I think that U.S. investors, their perceptions of Pakistan are clouded by certain perceived policy obstacles that if Pakistan were to address them, I think may make it easier or more likely that U.S. investors would want to come in and look at the Pakistani tech sector. And, I'm talking about things like taxation policies, regulatory regimes, things like that. I know that American investors are put off by those types of obstacles. Red tape as well. These are not new, but these are concerns that U.S. investors have about the Pakistani investment environment on the whole. So, if there could be more of an effort by the current government to address some of those issues, I think that would be good. And I should say it's encouraging. If I'm not mistaken, you have a new governor, a new central bank governor. And as I recall, one of his priorities, particularly during his time in the central bank previously, because he had been the deputy governor before, he had been a big proponent of digitizing many more things. He wanted to make Pakistan's financial system more modern and more digitized. That,
Right.
I think, is seen as a good thing by
Right.
American investors. So things like that, showing a true desire to change things around, pass the reforms that would make more
Absolutely.
America.
Michael, since you actually brought up the issue of taxation and duties, I totally get it because even now, government of Pakistan keeps on talking about the need for one window operation. But because India's name was mentioned earlier, Indian government, previous government and this government also came up with this idea of GST, goods and services tax, which actually merges the three tiers of taxation and makes it one window operation. Do you think that any such thing for investment in Pakistan might be prudent to attract more US investment in Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean that idea. Anything would help. Anything that signifies the political will to pass, necessary reforms to strengthen the regulatory environment, to make potential investors in the U.S. less concerned about taxation policies. I think that seeing if that political will is there, and if American investors see that, that would certainly be a good thing. But obviously, you have to start with discussions and negotiations. I think it's important for there to be more discussions between officials on both sides about tech issues, and these discussions could occur, with the State Department, but also I think more broadly with Treasury and Commerce, because these are big, complex issues for sure. So I think that the first step is just to get a sense of what the main asks are of the U.S. side, and if you could convene discussions with the private sector in the U.S. and their counterparts in Pakistan, that could be helpful too. I mean, what are the big
Right,
asks? What are
absolutely. And Michael, of course, another important aspect that you talked about in terms of what the Lava Syed highlighted was, of course, the aftermath of the devastating floods in Pakistan and the kind of climate-induced issues that Pakistan has been facing or will continue to face in the future. So he also talked about the ways in which there can be opportunities for U.S. to bring in any solutions in terms of food security issues or such climate-induced issues that Pakistan may be facing in the future. But considering, of course, that even food security is now a global concern and is also a concern of the U.S., in terms of what exactly will be the areas or potential ways in which we can actually collaborate with the U.S.'s support, because climate change disaster in Pakistan, of course, has been very real for quite some time, and especially in the wake of this devastating floods. We've been trying to tell the international community how real it is, and we have suffered and that we may also possibly suffer in the future as well. So what can the U.S. do in terms of facilitating efforts towards Pakistan, not just in the aftermath of these floods, but also in general and also in terms of food security issues?
And by the way, this actually, let me also refer to Samantha Power, who is head of the USAID, her recent interviews as well, where she has actually highlighted that the U.S. is in possession of crops which are climate resistant, particularly flood and extreme weather resistant. Is there a possibility to explore that Pakistan can get access to that kind of technology or that kind of seeds as well, so that our agriculture and food security, as rightly pointed out by Sana, is also ensured?
I mean, what I'm hearing from U.S. officials these days, that everything is potentially on the table. It's just a very healthy, or not very, it's a relatively healthy environment right now for the U.S. and Pakistan to really think about what areas would make most sense for them to cooperate in. And indeed, the issue of climate change mitigation, adaptation is a huge priority for the U.S. in its foreign policy, broadly speaking. And I think that certainly the floods have hit home for many in Washington of just how vulnerable Pakistan is to climate change. And I think there's a very real desire to look for ways to work together on that front. I mean, the U.S., I know the U.S. government, it favors or it supports the idea of Pakistan developing some type of formal decarbonization strategy. And the U.S. would like to be helpful in that. How it would provide that help is uncertain, but certainly there's a desire to help there. Now, with food security, that's obviously, there is a legacy of cooperation around food and agricultural cooperation. And back when the U.S. and Pakistan had their strategic dialogue some years ago, food security, as I recall, was one of the pillars. So, clearly there's been some work done there. The U.S. has provided a lot of assistance on agricultural capacity issues over the years. So again, I think it comes down to just finding ways to ensure that the two sides could be talking regularly on fairly high levels. And here I think is where USAID can be very helpful. USAID, I think, is still trying to figure out what type of strategy it would want to have in Pakistan beyond the immediate humanitarian assistance coming after the floods. So again, the key is to muster enough political will and bandwidth, whatever term you want to use in Washington, to ensure that you have the right people around the table talking to Pakistani counterparts about what can be done down the road to strengthen Pakistan's agricultural sector, to make it more efficient at a moment when it's still obviously, as you know, is a key economic sector, but has struggled with efficiency, and the weaknesses will be even stronger given what's happened with the floods.
Very true. Michael, if we talk about cooperation in the defense sector, of course we know that back in a couple of months ago, of course, Secretary Blinken, he categorically said that Pakistan and US, they have a common enemy, obviously sitting in Afghanistan in shape of terrorism, and Pakistan is facing terrorism. So both of the countries, they have the common enemy. And in that context, of course, US offered Pakistan with a $450 million package related to sustainment of F-16s. Can we see a further enhancement when it comes to defense sector, cooperation in the defense sector in coming days, sir?
And by the way, let me piggyback on this because earlier you said that last time you spoke to us, you were not that optimistic, and this time you are. I remember last time I asked you whether there's a possibility of revival of strategic dialogue that you just mentioned. At that time, you said no, there is none. Do you think that this time there is a possibility now, or we might be heading towards a possibility of revival of that kind of cooperation?
Yeah, so briefly to your question, Farouk, no, I don't think we're going to see a return of the formal strategic dialogue that was there some years back when you had this dialogue on very high levels. But I do think there's scope for the return of some type of discussions or regular dialogue, even if at lower levels in a strategic dialogue, on the types of issues that animated the strategic dialogue in the past. So I think that I could envision more space for regular discussions, even if it's not as on high of a level. Now, in terms of defense cooperation, I actually don't see much momentum for this, quite frankly. My sense is that the U.S. certainly, as you note, shares a concern with Pakistan about the Islamic State threat in Afghanistan. But I'm not really sure what could happen there anytime soon. I mean, the U.S. Appears to, whatever capacity it had to carry out that strike on Ayman al-Zawahiri, setting aside the question of what assistance Pakistan may have provided, I think that the U.S. is satisfied with its ability to project the ability to manage and strike terrorist threats in Afghanistan on its own for the most part. But I think that at this point, the momentum and the focus will be on the non-security side, and particularly on the issues that we mentioned, the humanitarian assistance, climate change, and especially trade and investment, broadly speaking. But again, since there's a better environment for broader discussions now than there was, say, 6 months ago, I do think that we may see